guys, welcome to this new episode for Sketchcast. In today's episode, I'm going to show you my setup. Now, the first app that I use regularly to code, it's called Sublime Text. And as you can see here, it has this custom theme that I've changed a little bit over the months and in the past weeks. But other than that, it's a pretty simple editor, as you know, and it's really fast and it's really simple. And I switched to Sublime when I was using Atom, and I was recording an episode for Sketchcast actually, and Atom kept crashing on me because I had an old Mac, and I decided to move from Atom and move from web apps, and then just gave Sublime a try. And there's a bunch of reasons why I use Sublime every day. First and foremost, to code websites and stuff like that, or most importantly, when I have SVGs that I have here on my desktop, I can just drag them, and then I can drag them all actually, and then I'm gonna have a couple of lines of code, and you're gonna see how fast everything is. But basically, what I can do is clean the sketch or clean the SVGs a little bit more, even though Sketch has done a really great job in the last months cleaning the code of their SVGs. But as you can see, everything is super fast. Everything is super snappy because it's written natively. Pretty much, it's written in like C or wherever. So it's a really interesting tool. Now, if I have to make a change or if I have to make something, I can just make it right away, save it, and then go back into Sketch with the SVG. Cool. Let's hide the desktop icons. Let's not save that. And the second tool that I use regularly, it's called Final Cut Pro. Now let's open it real quick. And there we go. As you can see here, I have some of the past videos that we released. And you can see that I have here all the cuts and all the transition elements. And you can see how everything starts playing here. And you can see if I zoom in a little bit the transitions that I use or the sound editing that I do, etc., etc. You can see here a transition, for instance, you can see the initial theming and how it fades a little bit away from this point, the transition that it zooms, etc., etc., etc. So as you can see, this is one of the tools that I use a lot for Sketchcast. And with that one, I use the counterpart of Final Cut, which is basically Logic Pro X. I use Logic Pro X to add a little bit of sound editing to the voice in order to sound a little bit more professional, right? And I add speech enhancers, channel EQs, compressors, de-essers, and I add a little bit of a limiter. So we can go from a speech that sounds pretty okay because I'm pretty close to the microphone and the microphone is pretty good, to something that sounds a little bit more professional because it sounds a little bit more mellow. Now, the queen of the apps that I use every day is Sketch, obviously. And as you can see here, I have a file called Symbolicon with a lot of the icons that I use to do the cover images for Sketchcast. But basically, this is sort of the tool that I use and I tell you and I show you guys every week. So it's pretty cool to have here, actually. And this might come as a surprise to some of you guys, but one of the apps that I use a lot also, mostly for image retouching and, a lot of that stuff like liquefying images and stuff like that, is called Photoshop, obviously. And I use Photoshop a lot, and I switched from Affinity Designer mainly because of Lightroom and also because of the Typekit plan and stuff like that. And so the last project that I did in Adobe Photoshop was this website that I never showed anyone, so that's cool. But basically, I started doing this website for a fake company called Spaced, and it had all those graphics, and this is not something that I could do in Sketch, basically because of the fact that it has a ton of layers and it has a ton of retouching and a ton of blending modes, brushes, etc., etc. Now we can cover this in another episode, right? We can cover how to do all those effects in another episode. As you can see, for instance, this is to show that I added another C on top of the C that we had for the first image. And then I added a lot of image coloring in order to make it seamless. You can see the main image here, and also, some hidden ones, etc., etc. So this is to show that, you can see the little dots of another image that represented the background being in this sort of space. And Photoshop is not the best tool for a lot of stuff. Like, for instance, if you want to do an app, or even if you want to do a pretty simple website, you don't need to use Photoshop for that. You can use Sketch and you're fine with it. But if you want to start doing more image retouching and stuff like that, and more seamless transitions between the stuff, and because this was a concept and not something that, someone had to implement, I jumped into Photoshop. And other than that, if we save this real quick and close, I use, my favorite 3D software, which is Cheetah 3D, right? And I use this to make rough concepts and to just practice a little bit my 3D skills. And as you can see, they're not that good, but that's why I haven't done any episode on 3D just yet. But as you can see, that was my try for a clay iPhone right here. You can see all the subdivisions and stuff like that. And Cheetah is really cool because it allows you to do really complex stuff in a really easy way. And what I admire the most about Cheetah is that it's done by just one guy and one guy only. And that's pretty impressive considering all the math and all the algorithms that you need to do in order to create those subdivisions and this smoothness. Look at that. It's really cool. But regardless, the last app that I want to show you, and I know that my setup is not super interesting, but you checked a couple of apps that I use here and there. But the app that I use the most in my phone, in my iPad, and in my desktop is, without any doubt, Things. As you can see, I have here my to-dos, and I can change the day that I want them. I can add reminders. I can add calendar events on top of the day. So I use this app every single day at night to check what I'm going to do tomorrow. And then in the morning to check my meetings, my to dos, etc., etc. So instead of using a notebook, I just use this, and it's really cool, really intuitive to use, and the design is beautiful. And, let's click this to do. And there we go. I hope you learned a ton today, guys. And if you did, hit me up in Spectrum or on Twitter, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.